The flashing red and blue lights in the rearview mirror came without warning, without cause, without the slightest justification. Sergeant Carl Briggs saw the midnight blue Mercedes S-Class glide through the manicured streets of Briarwood and decided, in that single instant, that the man behind the wheel did not belong. Briarwood was the kind of place where lawns were measured in acres, where the country club membership list doubled as the town's power structure, and where the local police force had long ago stopped pretending it served anyone but the people who paid the highest property taxes. Briggs smirked as he flipped on the light bar. He was already tasting the humiliation he planned to deliver. He had no idea the man he was about to pull over was the newly sworn Attorney General of the state. The digital clock on the dashboard of the Mercedes read 11:37 p.m. Elias Grant exhaled slowly, rolling the tension out of his shoulders against the soft leather of the driver's seat. At 48 years old, he had just reached the summit of a 20-year climb through the ugliest trenches of public service. He had prosecuted corrupt cops, broken open patronage machines, and served as a relentless district attorney who refused to look the other way. 3 days earlier, he had placed his hand on a Bible and taken the oath as the state's chief law enforcement officer. The transition had been a blur of press conferences, transition briefings, and a mountain of unfinished cases left by his predecessor. All he wanted tonight was the quiet of his own home. He was cutting through Briarwood, the notoriously affluent suburb that sat like a polished gemstone on the edge of the state capitol. He knew the town's reputation the way a surgeon knows scar tissue. Years earlier, as a civil rights litigator, he had handled complaint after complaint about Briarwood officers who treated dark skin the same way a bloodhound treats a scent. Streetlights swept across his face in steady rhythm as he held the speedometer needle exactly on 35. His charcoal suit was custom cut, the tie loosened, the top button of the collar undone. On the passenger seat rested a scuffed leather briefcase, heavy with confidential files. He was less than a mile from the interstate on-ramp when the night behind him exploded into color. Red and blue strobes shattered the darkness and filled the cabin of the Mercedes. Elias glanced in the rearview mirror. A Briarwood cruiser rode his bumper so close the headlights nearly disappeared. He felt no panic, only a cold, familiar numbness that had lived in his bones since he was 17 years old, driving his mother's worn-out sedan through neighborhoods that did not want him there. Degrees, titles, authority. None of it mattered when the lights came on at night. In that moment, he was simply a black man in an expensive car on the wrong side of an invisible line. He signaled, passed a dark stretch of shoulder, and pulled into the brightly lit parking lot of a closed CVS pharmacy 200 feet farther on. Always light, always cameras. He parked, killed the engine, and rolled down every window. Both hands went to the 10 and 2 position on the wheel. He waited. In the side mirror, he watched the heavy door of the cruiser swing open. Sergeant Carl Briggs climbed out. Late 40s, thick through the chest, uniform tailored a size too tight so the muscles showed. He walked with the exaggerated swagger of a man who had spent 20 years policing golf cart thefts and housewives on prescription pills, yet still carried himself like a soldier in occupied territory. Behind him, a younger, thinner officer emerged and hung back near the headlights, flashlight clutched tight. Officer Ryan Foster, 6 months on the job, and already looking like he wished he were somewhere else. Briggs did not come straight to the window. He stopped at the trunk first, pressing a deliberate thumb against the taillight. Old school insurance, in case the driver bolted and somehow managed to kill him. Then the blinding tactical beam stabbed into the side mirror, washing out Elias's vision before the sergeant finally stepped up. "Evening," Briggs drawled, the word thick with contempt. The flashlight never left Elias's face. "Good evening, officer." Elias's voice was deep, calm, the same register he used when a hostile witness started to squirm on the stand. You know why I pulled you over? I have absolutely no idea. I was traveling at the posted limit of 35. Registration is current. Every light on this vehicle is functioning. Perhaps you could enlighten me. Briggs gave a short, humorless laugh. He did not like the vocabulary. He did not like the tone. Most drivers, especially the ones who looked like Elias, stammered or got loud. This man sat as if he were the one holding court. You failed to maintain your lane, Briggs lied without hesitation. Crossed the solid yellow back at Maple Avenue. I did not, Elias said. Simple, flat. A statement of fact, not an argument. But if you feel a citation is necessary, I will accept it and contest it in court. Briggs's jaw tightened. License, registration, and proof of insurance. My wallet is in the inside left pocket of my jacket. Registration and insurance are in the glove box. I'm going to reach for the wallet first. Just get the ID, buddy. No sudden moves. Elias moved with deliberate slowness, produced the standard state driver's license, and handed it over. Briggs snatched it, shone the light on the plastic, and read the name aloud as if tasting something sour. Elias Grant, this your car, Elias? It is. Brand new S-Class. Runs what, 130, 140? You must have a pretty good job. What do you do? I work for the state. Briggs barked a laugh that bounced off the empty pharmacy walls. What, you drive a bus? Or you somebody's chauffeur? Because when I see a guy like you in a car like this, he's usually either driving the boss or he borrowed it without asking. The racial edge was naked now. Elias's fingers tightened a fraction on the wheel. The leather creaked. I can assure you the vehicle is registered in my name. Run the plates if you doubt it. Briggs did not like the sudden chill in the other man's voice. Cops like him fed on fear. When fear refused to appear, it felt like an attack. There's been a string of burglaries in the upscale neighborhoods around here, Briggs said, tapping the license against his chin. High-end electronics, jewelry, and here you are, driving through a town you don't live in at midnight. I am traveling home from my office in the capital. Is it a crime in Briarwood to use public roads after dark? Don't get smart with me, boy. The word cracked through the night like a whip. Elias went completely still. In the quiet of his mind, a very precise, very unforgiving file opened. Sergeant Carl Briggs had just ceased to be an inconvenience. He had become a liability to every badge in the state, and Elias Grant was the man who oversaw them all. Officer, Elias said, voice dangerously polite, I strongly recommend you maintain a professional demeanor. Step out of the car. From the cruiser, Officer Foster jogged forward. Sarge, everything okay? Get over to the passenger side and keep an eye on him. I told you to step out, Grant. Elias opened the door and rose to his full 6'2" height. The tailored suit made him look carved from something harder than the night. He closed the door calmly and folded his arms. Under Pennsylvania versus Mims, you have the authority to order me out during a lawful stop. I will note for the record, however, that this stop is predicated on a fabricated violation and that your subsequent questioning constitutes a baseless investigatory detention devoid of reasonable suspicion. Briggs blinked as if the words had struck him physically. What the hell are you babbling about? I am not babbling, Sergeant. I am stating my rights. Briggs stepped into Elias's space, chest puffed. You think you're some kind of lawyer? I am an attorney, yes. Briggs turned to the rookie with an ugly laugh. You hear that, Foster? We got ourselves a lawyer, Johnny Cochran over here. Where'd you get your degree, Grant? Printed off the internet? One of those online mills that mails you a certificate for $100? Let me guess. Slip and falls for a strip mall firm. I received my Juris Doctor from Columbia Law School. Magna cum laude. Right, and I'm the King of England. Briggs shone the light over Elias's hands and pockets. Any weapons on you? Needles? Drugs? I am unarmed. I do not use narcotics. Hands on the hood. Are you conducting a Terry frisk? Because to do so, you need reasonable suspicion that I am armed and presently dangerous. Given my compliance and my status as an officer of the court, you have none. I have suspicion you're resisting my lawful orders, Briggs shouted, face flushing dark. Hands on the hood now, or I put you on the ground and cuff you. Across the car, Officer Foster looked sick. Sarge, maybe we should just run the license and give him a warning. He's not doing anything. Shut up, Foster. This guy thinks fancy words mean he doesn't have to listen to the police. Elias considered ending it. One sentence would have stopped everything. But he thought of the teenagers who drove these same roads without Columbia degrees, the single mothers, the people who had no state seal in their pocket. He needed to see how deep the rot went. Slowly, deliberately, he turned and placed both palms flat on the hood of his own car. Briggs smirked, kicked Elias's legs apart, and began a search that had nothing to do with officer safety. Hands moved with unnecessary force over the suit, the waistband, the ankles. He pulled the cell phone free and set it on the hood. Then his fingers found something rigid inside the jacket. Do not reach into my pockets, Elias warned, voice like stone grinding. A Terry frisk is limited to outer clothing. You have no probable cause for an interior search. Feels like a weapon. Briggs shoved his hand inside anyway and came out with a thick leather badge wallet. He stared at it, turning it over in the strobing light. What's this? Fake badge? You playing dress-up? That is my official identification. I strongly suggest you open it and read it carefully. The parking lot had gone dead quiet, except for the low idle of the cruiser and the distant rush of the interstate. Officer Foster swallowed hard. Every instinct he possessed was screaming that the man they had stopped was not the prey. Open it, Sarge, Foster called, voice shaking. Just look at it, Briggs sneered. Relax, rookie. I've seen 100 of these sovereign citizen types buy fake tin stars on Amazon. Impersonating a state official is a felony. You understand me, counselor? I understand the law perfectly, Sergeant Briggs. The question is whether you do. In the last 10 minutes, you have violated the Fourth Amendment, conducted an illegal search under the false pretext of a Terry stop, and threatened me with false imprisonment. I am giving you one final opportunity to return my property. Write whatever fabricated citation you prefer, and let me go. It was a generous out. Ego refused it. You don't give me opportunities, boy. I am the law out here, and you are just another thug who got lucky with a paycheck. Elias lifted his hands from the hood and turned. He ignored the hand hovering near Briggs's gun. Open the wallet, Carl. The authority in the voice was absolute, the same tone that had made cartel lieutenants and corrupt politicians sweat under oath. Briggs blinked. For a fraction of a second, doubt flickered. Then he flipped the wallet open. Gold caught the flashing lights first. A heavy, brilliantly polished shield far larger and more intricate than any municipal badge. The state seal sat perfectly centered. Below it, behind clear plastic, was a newly issued high-security identification card bearing Elias Grant's face, and, in bold black lettering that could not be mistaken, Elias Grant, Attorney General State Department of Justice. Briggs stopped breathing. The cicadas went silent. The wind died. The only sound left was the heavy thud of the sergeant's heart against his ribs. His eyes hunted for a flaw, a watermark error, anything that would make the shield a forgery. There was none. The holographic seal of the governor's office glittered under the strobes. Sarge, Foster called. What does it say? Who is he? Briggs could not speak. The arrogant sneer had melted into slack-jawed terror. Color drained from his face until he looked corpse-pale in the blue light. Elias stood perfectly still. The polite restraint he had worn since the stop began was gone, replaced by the cold, precise presence of the highest law enforcement officer in the state. You asked about my law degree, he said quietly. The words carried like thunder. I did graduate from Columbia, and the job you assumed involved driving someone else's car involves oversight of every police department, every district attorney's office, and every law enforcement agency in this state, including the Briarwood Police Department. Briggs's mouth opened. Only a dry, broken sound came out. "Officer Foster," Elias said, without looking away from the sergeant. "Come here and look at this identification." Foster hurried around the front of the Mercedes, read the badge, and took 3 involuntary steps backward, as if the sergeant had suddenly become radioactive. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Attorney General Grant? I had no idea, sir." "I am aware. Your sergeant initiated a stop without probable cause, lied about a traffic violation, illegally detained me, used racially charged language, and conducted an illegal search of my person while you stood by and watched." Foster looked ready to be sick. "Sir, I'm just a rookie. He's my training officer." "I know, which is why you still have a chance to salvage your career, depending entirely on what happens in the next 5 minutes. Elias plucked the wallet from Briggs's trembling fingers and slipped it back into his breast pocket. "Sergeant Briggs," he said, speaking the name like a diagnosis. "You asked me earlier if I knew why you pulled me over. I believe I have the answer now." The humid night air had turned thick, almost unbreathable. The flashing lights that had once symbolized absolute authority now felt like the glare of an interrogation room. Briggs tried to speak. "Sir, Attorney General Grant, this is a massive misunderstanding. I thought you matched the description of a suspect we've been looking for." "A suspect," Elias repeated, voice dangerously level. "Describe him. Height, weight, vehicle make and model, and do not lie. Tomorrow morning, my deputies will audit every dispatch log and bolo your department has issued in the last 90 days. A bead of cold sweat tracked down Briggs's neck. "He was a black male, sir, driving a luxury sedan. So your articulable reasonable suspicion for pulling me over, detaining me, and threatening me with felony charges was that I am a black man in a Mercedes." Elias stripped the police jargon away until only the raw racism remained. "You did not see me cross a yellow line. You did not smell drugs. You saw the car and the color of my skin and decided I was either a criminal, a chauffeur, or a fraud." Briggs raised both hands, the tough guy persona collapsing. "No, sir, not at all. We just have to be thorough out here. Duty to the residents, routine check, professional courtesy, cop to cop. Do not ever equate yourself to me, Sergeant, and do not insult my intelligence by calling this routine." Elias's eyes narrowed. "You remind me of a detective I prosecuted in 2018, Raymond Stokes out of the 6th Precinct. He used the same thoroughness excuse when he was caught planting evidence. Stokes is currently serving 8 years in federal prison. Do you know who put him there?" Briggs's knees actually wobbled. Every cop in the state knew the Stokes case. It was the one that had earned Elias Grant the nickname the Iron Prosecutor. "You did, sir," he whispered. "Exactly." Elias turned to the rookie. "Officer Foster, is your body camera recording?" Foster glanced down. The small black device on his chest glowed with a steady red ring. "Yes, sir. Since we initiated the stop, audio and video." Elias looked at Briggs's chest. The camera was there, but dark. "Yours is off. Convenient mechanical failure or a deliberate violation of policy during a traffic stop?" "Battery was dying, sir." The lie cracked in the middle. "Officer Foster, secure the dashcam footage. Do not let it overwrite. Do not turn it off. And do not let Sergeant Briggs anywhere near that vehicle. Understood?" "Understood, sir." Foster practically dove into the passenger seat to guard the system. Elias drew his phone, scrolled past the governor and half the state senate, and dialed. He put the call on speaker so Briggs could hear every ring. It was 12:09 a.m. 3 rings, a groggy voice answered. "Brennan, Chief Walter Brennan, this is State Attorney General Elias Grant." There was the sound of a man nearly falling out of bed. "Attorney General? Sir, good Lord, what time is it? Is there an emergency?" "There is a significant situation. I am standing in the closed CVS parking lot on Maple Avenue in Briarwood. I am being detained by 2 of your officers. Detained? Sir, my men detained you for what? That is precisely the question I have been asking Sergeant Carl Briggs. He pulled me over on a fabricated lane violation, mocked my profession, ordered me out of the vehicle without lawful justification, illegally searched me, and threatened me with jail until he reached into my pocket and found my Attorney General credentials. Silence stretched across the line, heavy and absolute. When Brennan spoke again, he sounded as if the air had been punched from his lungs. Sir, please tell me you are joking. I do not joke about the Fourth Amendment, Chief, and I certainly do not joke about your officers treating the citizens of this state like second-class subjects. I want you here. Now. I'm leaving the house this second. 5 minutes. Please, just hold tight. I'll handle this. The line went dead. Elias slipped the phone away and looked at the man who, 10 minutes earlier, had believed himself invincible. Briggs was trembling openly now, chest heaving. Sir, please, he begged. I have 20 years on the force, wife, 2 kids in college. If I lose this job, I lose the pension. Everything. It was a mistake. Just let me write a warning and we can all go home. You should have thought of your family before you violated your oath, Elias said, voice empty of mercy. Did you think about the families of the young men you have terrorized on this stretch of road? Their futures, when you slapped handcuffs on them for the crime of driving through your town? He turned, opened the passenger door, and lifted the scuffed briefcase onto the roof of the Mercedes. The brass latches snapped open with clean authority. You see, Carl, tonight was never random. Fate has a sense of humor. 4 minutes later, the scream of tires shattered the suburban quiet. An unmarked black Ford Explorer vaulted the curb and skidded to a halt behind the cruiser. Chief Walter Brennan scrambled out, late 50s, pajama pants stuffed into unlaced combat boots, a department windbreaker thrown over a white undershirt. He was red-faced, sweating, and already shouting before his boots hit the pavement. He shoved Briggs backward by the chest. Shut your mouth, Briggs! Not one damn word! Hand me your sidearm, now! Chief, please, your weapon. With shaking hands, Briggs unholstered the Glock and surrendered it. Brennan pointed at the curb. Sit. Do not move. Do not speak. Briggs collapsed onto the concrete and buried his face in his hands. Brennan turned to Elias, voice dropping into something close to pleading. Attorney General Grant, sir, I cannot begin to apologize. This is an absolute disgrace. Sergeant Briggs will be suspended without pay immediately, pending a full internal investigation. He will be stripped of his badge. Elias did not take the offered hand. He simply stared until Brennan let it fall. An internal investigation, Walter? You want to handle this in-house? You think sweeping one bad apple under the rug solves my problem with the Briarwood Police Department? Brennan blanched. Sir, Briggs is a rogue. He acted entirely outside policy. Stop lying to me. Elias reached into the open briefcase and pulled out a thick, heavily tabbed manila folder. It landed on the hood of the Mercedes with a solid, final thud. For the last 14 months, long before I took the oath as Attorney General, I served as District Attorney for this region. My office began receiving a grossly disproportionate number of complaints about racial profiling, illegal searches, and civil rights violations stemming from traffic stops in Briarwood. We brought in the state's Civil Rights Enforcement Division. Under Special Prosecutor Dominic Hale, we quietly pulled your department's traffic data. African American and Hispanic drivers make up barely 12% of the traffic that passes through Briarwood. They account for 68% of your midnight shift stops and 82% of your vehicle searches. We didn't stop at statistics. We subpoenaed internal emails. We interviewed officers forced out for refusing to play along. We discovered an unwritten quota and containment policy. Your night shift supervisors explicitly instruct officers to pull over minorities in expensive vehicles under the pretext of looking for burglary suspects. You incentivize it. Brennan's face had gone the color of old paper. Attorney General, you can't possibly believe I sanctioned... I know you sanctioned it. We have the sworn statements. We have the data. The only thing my office lacked before I took the new oath was indisputable, first-hand, high-definition evidence of the policy being executed in real time by one of your senior training officers with no extenuating circumstances. Elias gestured at the empty parking lot, at Briggs on the curb, at the still flashing lights. Which brings us to tonight. I have an apartment in the capital. I could have stayed there. Instead, I chose to drive a brand new S-Class through the heart of Briarwood at midnight, exactly at the speed limit. I made myself the bait. Sergeant Briggs performed exactly as predicted. He took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. And thankfully, Officer Foster's body camera and the cruiser's dash cam captured every unconstitutional second of it. Brennan rubbed both hands down his face and let out a long, defeated sound. Federal indictments, a Department of Justice takeover, the end of everything he had built. So, Chief, Elias said, closing the briefcase with a sharp click, we are not doing an internal investigation. As of this moment, the Briarwood Police Department is under a sweeping civil rights probe by the State Attorney General's office. Sergeant Briggs is not going to be suspended. He is going to be arrested. Arrested! Briggs scrambled to his feet. Sir, you can't. Chief, tell him. Under Section 242 of Title 18, Elias recited, voice carrying across the asphalt. Deprivation of rights under color of law is a federal crime. Walter, you are going to take the handcuffs off your belt and arrest your sergeant right now, or I will call the state police barracks and they will arrest both of you. Brennan did not hesitate. Survival overrode loyalty. He turned, pulled the steel cuffs free, and ordered, Hands behind your back, Carl. Chief, please, we're brothers. I was just doing what you told us to do. Tears spilled down Briggs's face as he backed away. Do not make me use force. Brennan grabbed a wrist, twisted it, and the ratcheting metal clicked loud in the quiet night. Elias watched without expression as the 20-year veteran, the arrogant bully of Briarwood, was reduced to a sobbing, handcuffed figure on the curb of a CVS parking lot. Then he turned to the rookie. Officer Foster, tomorrow morning at 8:05 a.m., you will report to the State Attorney General's office in the Capitol. You will sit down with Special Prosecutor Hale and give a full, sworn, unredacted statement about everything you have seen and heard during your 6 months in this department. If you are entirely truthful, you keep your badge. If you omit a single detail to protect these men, you will share a cell with them. Do we have an understanding? Foster nodded so hard the words tumbled out. Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. I'll tell you everything. Elias adjusted his jacket, picked up the briefcase, and opened the door of the Mercedes. He looked once more at the flashing lights, the handcuffed sergeant, and the ruined chief. Good night, gentlemen. I'll see you in court. The sun had barely cleared the horizon over the state capitol when Elias Grant walked into his office at the Department of Justice building. The charcoal suit from the night before had been replaced by sharp navy pinstripe, armor for the war that was about to begin. At exactly 8:05 a.m., the heavy oak doors opened. Special Prosecutor Dominic Hale entered, flanked by FBI Special Agent Patrick Quinn of the Public Corruption Unit. Trailing behind them, clutching a styrofoam cup as if it were a life raft, was Officer Ryan Foster. Good morning, Attorney General, Hale said, setting a thick stack of fresh transcripts on the desk. Officer Foster has been extremely cooperative. He's been talking since 6. Elias gestured to the chairs. Sit down, officer. Tell me exactly what you told Agent Quinn. Foster swallowed and sank into the leather. Sir, it's worse than racial profiling. The stops weren't just harassment. It was a revenue operation. Chief Brennan and Mayor Harold Prescott called it Operation Night Watch. Completely off the books. They targeted out-of-town minorities in luxury vehicles because those drivers wouldn't have local connections to fight the tickets in Briarwood Municipal Court. Agent Quinn leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. It goes deeper. Foster gave us the location of an off-site server where the department kept a secondary ledger. Briggs and a handful of senior officers were using civil asset forfeiture to seize cash, jewelry, sometimes the vehicles themselves, claiming they were proceeds of narcotics trafficking. There were never any drugs. The money was funneled into the town's general fund to pay for country club renovations and the mayor's re-election campaign. Elias's eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. This was no longer a handful of racist cops playing cowboy after midnight. This was an organized criminal enterprise operating under color of law. Sergeant Briggs had not been searching for a fake badge. He had been searching for cash to steal. "Get the warrants," Elias ordered, voice vibrating with absolute authority. "I want the Briarwood Police Department locked down. I want Mayor Prescott's financial records frozen. And I want federal agents kicking in the doors of Briarwood City Hall before their morning coffee gets cold." By noon, the quiet, affluent suburb of Briarwood had become the epicenter of a media earthquake. Satellite trucks choked the manicured streets. News helicopters circled overhead like vultures. At 1:15 p.m., Attorney General Elias Grant stepped to the podium in the state capitol press room. The flash of hundreds of cameras lit his face as he adjusted the microphones. "Good afternoon. Last night I personally initiated an undercover integrity test within the jurisdiction of the Briarwood Police Department. What that operation uncovered was a systemic rot that reaches the highest levels of the city's leadership. As of this morning, under the joint efforts of the State Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Briarwood Police Chief Walter Brennan, Mayor Harold Prescott, and Sergeant Carl Briggs have been placed under federal arrest." A collective gasp rolled through the press corps, followed by a storm of shouted questions. Elias raised one hand, and the room fell silent. They face a 32-count indictment, including conspiracy to violate civil rights, extortion under color of official right, and wire fraud. The badge is a symbol of public trust. When men like Carl Briggs and Walter Brennan turn that trust into a weapon of racial terror and financial extortion, they cease to be law enforcement officers. They become an organized crime syndicate. And in this state, we dismantle syndicates. 6 months later, the federal district courthouse in the Capitol felt less like a building and more like a cathedral of judgment. The Honorable Judge Harlan Whitfield, known for merciless sentencing of corrupt officials, presided with a stare that could freeze boiling water. At the defense table, wearing an ill-fitting orange jumpsuit, sat Carl Briggs. He had aged a decade in half a year. The muscular frame had collapsed. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by the hollow terror of a man who finally understood his life was over. The case had unraveled with devastating speed. Chief Brennan, terrified of dying in a federal penitentiary, had flipped immediately. His testimony confirmed that Briggs had been the primary enforcer of Operation Night Watch, personally responsible for more than 300 illegal searches and 50 fraudulent civil asset forfeitures. Faced with the dash cam footage of himself mocking and illegally searching the state attorney general, Briggs's lawyers had begged for any deal they could get. Elias Grant, seated at the prosecution table in a flawless gray suit, rose when Judge Whitfield called for sentencing. "Mr. Grant, does the state wish to make a final statement?" "We do, Your Honor." He walked to the podium, but did not look at the judge. He turned slightly so that his gaze locked directly onto Carl Briggs. The former sergeant flinched and stared at his shackled hands. "6 months ago," Elias began, voice clear and steady, "the defendant pulled me over in the dead of night. He looked at my vehicle. He looked at the color of my skin. And he made a calculation. He calculated that I was vulnerable. He calculated that because of the badge he wore, he could strip me of my dignity, my constitutional rights, and my freedom with absolute impunity. He asked me where I got my law degree. He mocked the very idea that a man who looked like me could hold a position of authority. But this case has never been about my title. It is about the hundreds of ordinary citizens who drove through Briarwood and did not have a badge of their own to protect them. The single mothers whose rent money was stolen under the guise of asset forfeiture. The young college students thrown against the hoods of their cars and terrorized simply for existing in a town that decided they did not belong. Elias stepped closer to the defense table. His voice dropped to a quiet, terrifying intensity. Carl Briggs believed he was the law. Today he will learn what the law actually is. Judge Whitfield nodded slowly, looking down at the defendant with profound disgust. Mr. Briggs, in 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a more brazen, vile abuse of authority. You did not protect and serve. You hunted and exploited. I accept the prosecution's recommendation in full. The gavel struck. Carl Briggs, you are hereby sentenced to 240 months, 20 years, in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole. You are remanded immediately to the custody of the United States Marshals. A choked sob escaped Briggs as two marshals hauled him to his feet. As they dragged him toward the side door, he looked back one last time, past his expensive lawyers, past the crowded gallery, and met the eyes of Elias Grant. Elias did not smile. He did not gloat. He simply stood perfectly straight, the living embodiment of the justice Briggs had spent an entire career mocking. The heavy wooden door slammed shut. That evening, the sun set clean and gold over the state capitol. Elias Grant walked down the stone steps of the Department of Justice building, briefcase in hand, the air crisp against his face. He approached the midnight blue Mercedes parked in its reserved space, slid behind the wheel, and breathed in the familiar scent of leather. He started the engine and pulled onto the highway. The roads felt different now. The flash of police lights in a rearview mirror no longer meant a predator waiting in the dark. One midnight traffic stop had brought down an entire corrupt empire, and the scales of justice, at last, had found their balance.